We have a minute left. Let me ask you, does Ukraine have chemical or biological weapons?
Ukraine has biological research facilities, which, in fact, we are now quite concerned Russian forces may be seeking to gain control of. So we are working with the Ukrainians on how they can prevent any of those research materials from falling into the hands of Russian forces.
We have BioLabs in Ukraine doing some kind of research that she clearly did not want to get into. And if you're not familiar with that, that was Marco Rubio trying to figure out what is up with the Russia and China claims that the U.S. is funding bioweapons research in Ukraine per Business Insider. And a couple other people have picked up on this story as well, but you would think more people would be talking about this. Business Insider went on to say a debunked conspiracy theory about U.S. bioweapons laboratories in Ukraine was seized on by Russia and Chinese media outlets. A debunked conspiracy theory touted by InfoWars and Twitter conspiracy theorists about the U.S. operating biological weapons laboratories in Ukraine has been seized on by the Russian and Chinese outlets. So basically, they keep telling us that this has been seized on by the Chinese outlets. They repeat that like 3 or 4 times in this article. So I think what they're trying to say is it's not true and that Russia and China is trying to run with this, but they do go on to say that on March 2nd, Foreign Policy reported on a Twitter user named War Clandestine. So they looked at this guy War Clandestine's post in February that said, it certainly appears Putin is targeting the cities and locations with U.S. BioLabs present. He is 100% going after the alleged bioweapons. So that was just on March 2nd. Pretty interesting if you ask me. In the same thread, War Clandestine outlined what they said was credible evidence that the U.S. had bioweapons in Ukraine. The account, which has been suspended, of course, was run by an individual named Jacob. I don't know why they gave us that information. No last names in the article. It will be in the description, so you can check this out yourself. But this Jacob, who appeared to be an American and also claimed to have served in the U.S. military per Foreign Policy. So first, let me just say this story has BS all over the place, but where there's smoke, there's definitely fire. Second, let's be real. It's never a good look to go off of something InfoWars says, right? If it's coming out of InfoWars, tread carefully. That's going to get some backlash. Third, when things are debunked without investigation, it's a play right out of the Democrats' playbook. And all the more reason to look into this, right? The U.S. admitted to having the biolabs over there, and they're trying to say that they're for food safety and consumer protection, and that they're not for weapons. Whatever, even if it is just food, why over there? What the hell? Fourth, why are we doing a bunch of shady research far, far away? And I guess if it's because it's dangerous, then yeah, we want to do things far away. But once again, I think the explanation we receive for this does not make any sense. Just like we're doing shady shit over in Wuhan. So I don't know that regardless if this is actually food that we're working on over there, China has historically gone after our intellectual property. And now that we have a war going on in Ukraine, of course they want whatever's in those labs. So is it a big deal? Kind of. If there's weapons, then absolutely. And we definitely don't want to be sharing our intellectual property with China. So it is kind of a big deal. Nor do we want to be sharing those things with Russia anyways. And why are we doing so much shady shit all the time, all over the world? Anyways, another argument being made is that they're actually studying pathogens over there. So let's just be careful not to jump to any conclusions yet, because we definitely can't trust Russia and China. So when they say we have biological weapons in Ukraine, perhaps that's just an excuse to move their cause forward, to put more effort into it. We'll just have to see. They pump out propaganda, we pump it out over here. It's so hard to know exactly what to believe. So take in all of it and just be cautious, be objective, keep reading, keep double checking. You know, we love to play with fire. In fact, I know we love to play with fire. Growing up, my brother and several friends used to play with fire all the time, and they all ended up burning themselves and getting hurt. So naturally enough, a story comes out about genetically modified mosquitoes set to be released in California and Florida. And I'm just like, oh, if I had hair, I'd be pulling it out right now. Millions of genetically modified mosquitoes are set to be released in California and Florida in an effort to reduce the number of real disease-carrying invasive mosquitoes. Huh. It didn't, this article that will be in the description did not go on to say exactly how that would work. So sure, let's release a bunch of genetically modified mosquitoes right after we may have just genetically created a virus that led to a pandemic. Yeah, that sounds like a great idea. And of course, they're doing it on both coasts. Cool. Awesome. This is per the Epoch Times, by the way. I'm not really sure how to feel about it's actually it is the Epoch Times. They put out a lot of stuff the mainstream media either does not want to run with or just doesn't want you to know. But the Epoch Times also runs with whatever's out there. They tell you everything, whatever news they can find, whatever story is going on. So I'm never sure what to believe from them. This is a story they reported, and you can check it out. Like I said, it's in the description. And the funny thing about this is I came across an article a couple weeks ago, definitely since I started doing this show, and I meant to talk about it, and I may have actually. I've done so many of these shows now. It's amazing how much content I've pulled out, but I'm pretty sure Bill Gates is involved with this. He's been talking about it, no surprise, and I'm pretty sure he's a part of this release. So I don't know. I don't trust Bill Gates, so even more reason to be concerned about this. I mean, why are we trying to do all these crazy things? I don't know. Anyways, we have so many news sources out there right now. So much content comes out every day. This show is an opinion analysis of that news, and it takes a lot of time to weed out the garbage, and why I can't always address everything or dig as deep into these stories as I would really like. It takes a long time. I do have a full-time job that requires a legit 9-10 hours a day. So I spend a lot of time of my personal time reading articles and looking up stories in places like NewsGuard to make sure that they've been certified and these are accurate stories and they've been fact-checked. Then I have to plan out the show, pull out the key talking points, and incorporate my opinion. This would be a dream job if it was all I did, but it's not. So please try to support me in this channel. Subscribe, like, share, and view by supporting this show. Obviously, if you like it, it will allow me to grow and take what I make and invest it right back in to the show and enhance the quality for us. Hopefully the sound sounds a little better today. I can hear the winding from my computer going on right now, and I know there's ways to drown out background sound. I just haven't got to that. I'm really just focused on doing these shows, getting used to researching, putting the show together, and then actually talking in front of the camera and trying to work on not saying ums and you knows and things like that all the time, the likes, if you will, which I say all those words all the time, so I apologize for all my filler words. I'm working on that. I sincerely am. And once I get beyond that, I want to start investing more into the technology side, get some video editing software, add some music to the backgrounds. If you can see, if you're watching this today, I actually have a mic in front of me. This is my very first investment into the show. I just got really sick of the poor sound quality, and some days I sound really quiet, some days I sound really loud, so I'm trying to find a way to get that more consistent. So here's my first investment into the show. Hopefully it's helping you out and you are hearing this more clear and it's a better experience for you today. It's an expensive world out there and the cost of everything is going up if you didn't notice. I'm trying to go as long as I can without spending a lot of money on this. So more to come on the Jay Rooney Show and the Jay Rooney Project over time. If you are listening to a podcast like this, you've probably heard about the parental rights and education bill that came out in Florida. Or if you didn't, or maybe you've heard it better known as the Don't Say Gay bill. For some reason, I still can't believe stories like this. Democrats do this all the time. This is their big play. This is the first play in their Democratic playbook, to twist something that's not even there, to make a huge deal about nothing. Like I said, there's nothing even here. There's nothing about the word gay, and they just want to get everybody all worked up and fighting over it. They love to fight. It's like they're so bored and they're just full of angry. They just need something to target their anger at and to go off on. I think the word gay is the new racist, right? Like they stole all meaning from the word racist the last couple of years. Everything's about race. Everything is racist. You call somebody a racist, it has no meaning anymore. So just watch. Everyone will be talking about the word gay now. Why do people feel the need? Why don't people feel the need to do their own research? Sorry. I mean, I just don't know, man. This boggles my mind. Like, have any of you listening to this? I hope you took the time to actually look up this bill and read it yourself before you start calling it the gay bill. Or maybe that's why you stopped by the Jay Rooney show, so you don't have to, because I looked it up for you. But anyways, look this up, people. It'll be in the description. Read this yourself. But anyways, this is what it actually says. Parental rights in education requires district school boards to adopt procedures that go along with certain provisions of law for notifying students' parents of specified information. It requires such procedures to reinforce fundamental right of parents to make decisions regarding upbringing and control of their children. It prohibits school districts from adopting procedures or student support forms that prohibit school district personnel from notifying parents about specified information or that encourage students to withhold information from parents. It also prohibits school district personnel from discouraging or prohibiting parental notification and involvement in critical decisions affecting students' mental, emotional, or physical well-being. It prohibits classroom discussion about sexual orientation or gender identity in certain grade levels. It requires school districts to notify parents of healthcare services, authorizes parents to bring action against school districts to obtain declaratory judgment. It provides for additional award of injunctive relief, damages, reasonable attorney fees, and court costs to certain parents. So what the hell does that have to do with the word gay? In fact, that sounds okay with me. And honestly, the more I think about it, why do we even need a bill in place so parents get to keep control of their kids? They're your kids. They're your kids, not the schools. Hey people, hey teachers, hey people who work in the school district, hey government. Kids they don't belong to the school or the community. They belong to the parent. Why do school boards who are government employees do things that the parents and the students in their district clearly don't want? Even I have to pay taxes. So I'm going to give my opinion on it because my taxes are going to some of these things in my school district. People on Twitter are just tweeting the word gay out over and over and over again. This is so ridiculous. And the worst part is Democrats believe this and run with this because they don't do any research. They just go with whatever the headline is, whatever the mainstream media says to say, whatever's popping up on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. And I used to hang out with people like this. At the beginning of the pandemic, they say 15% of us lost friends during the pandemic, and unfortunately, I did. I used to go along with kind of what my friends were saying, when we'd be talking about politics and certain social issues. And as time went on and things became more and more clear to me, I started opening up conversation and trying to get them to elaborate on their points and sharing my points with them. And it just turned into like them feeling really sorry and like they had all this empathy and, I just feel so bad for these people without ever looking into the facts. It was really hard for me, and I couldn't help just saying how I really felt and being honest. And I wanted to do something like this even before that experience, but I think that experience was definitely one of the things that inched me closer to wanting to start a show like this, because I just want to encourage you, if that is kind of you, if you feel like you get really emotional from the news and you're always feeling bad and you feel like your empathy is ruling your thoughts and deciding things for you, then I really think you need to take a step back and maybe just stop paying attention to the news for a while, or you really need to just carve out like an hour or two of your day and start actually reading the things that are upsetting you, because you might find they're not as bad as Democrats or the media likes to say. So anyways, here's another play that the Democrats like to use. They'll use a headline like this: "The bill prevents you from saying the word gay in school." The article goes on and on about not being able to use the word gay. Then in the last sentence, which most Dems will never get to, by the way, it'll say, but the bill doesn't actually say anything about the word gay. End of article. So basically they'll write an article claiming that the bill is about the word gay. The article will go on and on and on about how the article has nothing to do with the word gay, but they don't tell you that. They make it seem like it. And then at the end of the article, they'll slip in like one little sentence. Oh, by the way, this has nothing to do about the word gay. It kills me. How many times have you read something like that? It's every single day for me. And why I get so irritated by these fake BS twisted up stories that we all fight about too. This is related to critical race principles. You better believe it. The fact that CRP, not CRT, the T is for theory, when you implement it, you're actually applying the principles. So even if those principles are applied once, it's once too many. And you have states like Florida putting in measures to protect kids from these things and the parents. So I don't want to get into that whole critical race thing. I think Democrats are definitely using that to try to discredit Republicans, and Republicans maybe blowing that out of proportion to go after Democrats because it is so absurd. And I get it. Like I keep saying, doing these things, implementing critical race principles into an elementary school, middle school, or high school, even once in one place in the country is still just one too many places. We can't have that. So this bill, however, actually doesn't stop anything other than not being able to teach kids who don't know what sex is, sex ed yet. So you can't teach sex ed in third grade or under, which you really shouldn't be doing that anyways. And teachers shouldn't be hiding things from parents either. Parents have the right to go after a school for suggesting something to their kids, like, you might be trans, but don't tell your parents. Yeah, that's happened. And even if it's only happened once, it's one too many times. It's not cool. I don't even have kids. Kids belong to their parents. If you're a parent out there, your kid is yours. Not mine, not the communities, not the schools, not the governments. That kid belongs to you. This doesn't help your community by tearing families apart, because that's ultimately what this does. Telling kids to hide things from their parents will just tear them apart. I don't accept the argument that this is for community building. Teachers can seriously harm or change the course of a child's life, along with the community. Here's a story about my childhood, and a teacher, and a friend, and a future teacher. I'm going to go off script now for a second, so bear with me. I'm going to just shoot from the hip. So when I was really young, maybe I was pretty young. I want to say like kindergarten, first grade-ish, and I don't even know how old I was then. Maybe, let's say like I was somewhere between 9, maybe like 8 and 11 years old, we'll say. There was this guy that lived 2 houses down, same age, and there was a bunch of kids on my street. I grew up on a street with a ton of kids. And this kid and I would play together all the time, right? All the time. His mom was a teacher at the elementary school that we went to. And my parents weren't home a lot. My dad worked a ton. My mom had some issues, which I'm not going to get into that, which she's really good now. She had some struggles when I was a child. She persevered, she got through it, and we're really close now. Things are all good. And I don't want to make this about that. But basically my parents were going through some shit, right? I don't believe they had divorced yet at this point, but it was coming. I remember people telling me they could hear my parents fighting at night all the way down the street. So one day I was home alone, and where I grew up, we had stoops and sidewalks and a curb before the street. And I was sitting on the curb one day as just a real little kid, and I was throwing rocks into the street. And my friend's mom, who was a teacher at our elementary school, saw this. And she did not like it. But she didn't say anything to me. But she told my friend that I was a bad kid and that he was no longer allowed to play with me because I was throwing rocks. But it was also because of what my parents were going through and that they were not around. So she just assumed because of that I was a bad kid, instead of teaching me not to throw rocks into the street like a teacher should have. So then, as time progressed, because she was a teacher, because she knew all the parents of all the other kids that I hung out with, all the parents on the baseball team, who my mother signed me up for the wrong team one summer, or I just had all kinds of things happen as a child to kind of make me stand out, and people caught on that my parents were going through a tough time, and by the time parents divorced, I was definitely considered a bad kid, and I felt it and I knew it. I would say by the time I got to fourth grade, I already knew that I thought I was a bad kid. And it started with that experience because she told all these other parents, and all these other parents started telling their kids they weren't allowed to play with me, and they started treating me like a bad kid. So eventually I did start hanging out with the kids that were more rough around the edges, whose kids, whose parents weren't always around, who could run around the alleys with me and go hang out at the parks and kind of just do bad little boy stuff. When you're young and people tell you you're bad, you kind of embrace it. And that's what I did. By the time I was in 5th grade, I had joined a gang already. And all the kids thought I was really bad. And I got in a lot of fights at recess and stuff like that. And then by the time I got to middle school, I was definitely running with the bad kids, and I was associated to this gang. And luckily, right around I was only in it for a couple years, around 7th grade. A lot of the guys that I hung out with were a lot older in high school, and they all started getting in trouble and going to jail. So by the time I got out of middle school and I went into high school, I wasn't really affiliated with any gangs anymore or anything like that. Thankfully, all those people were out of my life. So let's just fast forward to high school, because here was the biggest eye-opening moment for me when I realized that all these things that I felt inside were true, and how people really looked at me. And I always felt really insecure about this and felt really bad about it, because I wanted to be a good person and I wanted to embrace things like school. If you can't tell by this show, if you're listening to the Jay Rooney Show, I do all these random episodes where I talk about all these random subjects. I just have a thirst for knowledge, and I love the world that we live in. And I wanted to be educated, but I also had ADHD and I'm dyslexic, and it was really hard for teachers to take the time to educate me. And in fact, while I was going through that in elementary school, sorry, I'm going to jump back to high school here in a second, but, they used to make me scrub the walls in our hallway with a toothbrush. We had tile walls at Whittier Elementary School in Waukesha, Wisconsin. They have tile walls. And because I was the bad kid, they didn't want to give me recess to get my energy out. They gave me a toothbrush and a bucket of soapy water, and I literally scrubbed the cracks of the tiles during recess. So anyways, that's how I was treated. And then I got to high school, and I was playing baseball, and I was pretty good. And I was playing with some kids that I hadn't had a chance to play with before. The way Waukesha School District is broken out, you go to middle school with a bunch of kids that might go off to different high schools. So I kind of had to make all new friends in high school, and I started playing baseball, and I made friends with this one guy, and we became really close friends. I actually wish we were still friends today. I kind of messed up that friendship myself. We were roommates right after high school, and I was going through a really difficult time, and I kind of tried to fight him. I think it was the last time I ever saw him. So I definitely regret that. If you're listening to this, if you ever come across this show and hear this, I'm sure you know who you are. I am sorry about that. But anyways, so I became good friends with this guy, and his parents were really involved in his life. He was the prototypical good kid. The parents made him do all his homework, and he had to get good grades and all those type of things. He had a curfew, and he wasn't allowed to run around the streets at night. Things like that. You know what I'm talking about. So one time, I had a really good game, and this guy comes up to me and he's like, "Hey, do you want to come over after the game? I'm having people over, and my parents wanted to get to know you. My parents were always really concerned about you because they know everything your parents went through, and they know you've, been running around with a rough crowd, and he's like, you seem like such a good kid." So I go to their get together that evening, and I'm hanging out with all these kids that I've always wanted to be a part of, right? This is like my freshman year in high school, I think, or sophomore year, summer going into sophomore year. So the parents, I run into their parents, they get to meet me. They basically echo what this guy said, and they're like, "Yeah, you're a really good kid. We're really impressed. You've had a really tough life, your parents, and you got into a lot of trouble the last few years and stuff like that." And the truth was, I got suspended like 5 or 6 times in middle school. Like, I did become a bad kid. I believed I was a bad kid, so I became a bad kid. But by the time I got to high school, I played a bunch of sports. And to play sports, you can't be bad. You have to get good grades. So I tried to straighten up. I tried to start running with these other crowds, which I did. And they accepted me. This was the moment they accepted me. And they told me all about all these things I already thought about how I was a bad kid. But if someone would have just taken the time to get to know me, they would have realized I wasn't a bad kid. So after that, all these people started treating me really well. And, this other kid that I grew up with, whose mom didn't let him play with me anymore because I threw rocks. We played on the football team together, and they used to host these football dinners. We would have a dinner as a football team every Thursday night before the Friday night game on varsity. And this particular kid and his mother did a lot of these dinners, and she would always tell me about how I had the best manners, how I always said please and thank you and all these things. It was because I was always so afraid of her. I always thought, I had to be on my best behavior in front of her. I had to do everything I could to prove this person that I was a good kid. And so fast forward to literally just within the last 6 months. So now this kid that I wasn't allowed to play with anymore, who him and his mother put me on this path of being a bad kid for like a legit 7, 8, maybe like a legit 6, 7 years stretch in my life, maybe less, 4 years, something like that. He's a teacher now, and he's constantly ranting on Facebook about his students and about his job. And I can't help but wonder, like, why would somebody like this want to be a teacher? And so finally one day he posts something on Facebook about how a kid came in during the lunch recess to ask him a question about an assignment I think he got an F on. And this guy made it seem like he didn't want to deal with the kid because he was eating lunch, and that's what he wanted to do. He wanted to take his break, so he kind of shooed the kid off, and the kid's response was, "Fuck you." Well, let me tell you, as a kid who has said fuck you to a lot of teachers growing up, if you don't seize that moment as a teacher, you're a bad teacher. You shouldn't be a teacher. If your reaction is to discipline that kid and to yell at that kid and to get all pissed off and upset, you're a bad teacher and you shouldn't be a teacher. And I don't care that you have to deal with stuff like that every day. Trust me, I'm well aware of the things you go through. You should have went to my high school. My freshman year English class, the teacher retired because of us. She would cry every day because of our class. We had 2 girls that were part of 2 different gangs in my class. Every day until they were kicked out of the class, broke out in fights, throwing their desks at each other, pulling each other's hair out, screaming, kicking. We had kids literally just blurting out every second of the class, throwing things that stick on the windows, throwing pencils up at the ceiling, trying to get them stick. She never actually even taught the class because she couldn't. And one time I came in after school and she was popping Advil because we gave her such a headache, and she was just bawling, and she told me about how she was going to retire because of us. Those are the type of kids that I grew up with. So I understand what teachers are going through, trust me. But I also know, because thankfully I had a couple teachers take an interest in me growing up, thankfully. So this guy, he disciplines this kid and is all pissed up that this kid responds with "fuck you" instead of telling this kid why he got an F. And the kid responded with an "F you" because the kid came to this teacher to learn about what he did wrong and was trying to, even if he didn't know exactly how to express himself or ask why he got the F, he was trying to figure out how to learn, how to educate, and how to figure out how to get a better grade and how to be successful and succeed. And instead you discipline him. That was a moment for you to make a difference in that kid's life. To first take a step back and explain why reacting with anger and frustration and saying "fuck you" to him was the wrong thing to do. And then you explain to the kid why you gave him the F. And then you show him what he could have done to get a better grade and all of his mistakes. And you take the time to teach him and to educate him, because you're called a teacher. You are a teacher. That's the name of your profession. To teach, to educate. It goes beyond the textbook. It goes beyond the paper that they wrote. There's something called life. Life is more important than anything that you're going to get out of a textbook. That was a huge life lesson that this guy did not seize that moment. He failed that kid. And that kid's going to remember that. Trust me, I remember all those moments. I remember Mr. Habonic in 7th grade telling me I was going to never amount to anything. He was my math teacher. I remember that shit. These kids will remember that too. So when teachers are putting in all these different programs, these critical race theory things, when you tell a white kid that he's bad for being white, or you tell a kid that they're really trans or they're gay or something like that, you're messing with these kids' minds. Let them be kids. Educate them on. Let them know that there's different sexualities and genders and all these things, and then let them figure it out and decide. If a little girl, if a little 12-year-old girl says, "Hey, that girl's pretty," that doesn't mean she's gay. That might just mean that girl's pretty, right? Whether you're a man or a woman, we all recognize a good-looking person. Whether they're a man or woman, a good-looking person's a good-looking person. It doesn't mean we're gay. So, sorry for my rant. If this show ever takes off and I ever become successful, I would love to write a book on my experience with education and our school systems, what it was like being the first kid in the Waukesha School District in Wisconsin to be diagnosed with ADHD, and how I was treated, how I was put in the hallway. I mentioned I had to wash walls with toothbrushes. They had no idea what to do with me. So I'm pretty passionate about school and teachers. And just so you know, I also have some experience. In my early 20s into my mid 20s, I was the Kids Fit leader for the YMCA Dane County. And I would travel around to different elementary schools teaching kids something called Kids Fit. And I would take over gym classes. I would run after school fitness programs for 6 through 12-year-olds. I was a personal trainer for 6 years, and I thought I was just going to get to work with people who want to lose weight, right? Or build muscle. And I'm sure that's what teachers think too. They're going to become a teacher and just educate. But that's not the case for teachers, nor was it for me as a personal trainer. I ended up working with autistic kids, handicapped people with serious depression. I'll never forget my first couple months on the job, and I was doing group training with these two women, and they came to me in tears of joy. And they both got off of their antidepressant medications, and they said it was because of me and my training and my positive influence on their lives. And, I get emotional thinking about that now because, like, what a cool thing to do. I always thought if you could change one person's life, you're changing the world. So when I think about a teacher, it's more about just teaching, just like personal training was more about personal training. And then to take it a step further, I became a big brother. And I specifically was motivated to do that because of the racial disparities where I live. I live in an area that has one of the worst achievement gaps between blacks and whites, one of the worst income gaps. It's really crazy, and most people in my area don't even know that. So I became a big brother, and I started working with that community. And I would go to school once a week with my little, and I would try to help him with homework, and I would observe, and I would see what's going on. So I know it's not easy for a teacher, but I've also experienced these things. If you don't have patience, if you're not willing to take the time to explain something and explain it again and again, and perhaps find another way to try to share that message and another way, and to be persistent and to not give up on a kid and not to get frustrated with a kid. That's why I think we should pay our teachers a lot more money. And I wish there was a system in place where teachers didn't get paid based off of taxes and it wasn't government money. I wish there was another way to fund them. I think we need to pump way more money into teachers. We need better people teaching our kids, because this guy, and same with this guy, if he ever hears this show, I would like to hope he knows exactly who he is. I don't want to say his name and put him on blast like that. And it's funny because after high school, I even ended up getting the shipping and freight job. And apparently parents that I grew up with were still talking about me even after high school. And I ran into this guy, I think at a grocery store. And he told me, he's like, oh, my mom heard that you've been working full time and you've been doing a really good job. You show up on time every day. You stay late every day. You do extra. Everybody's really proud of you and impressed with you. So even after I thought I had became a good kid and earned these people's respect, I still hadn't. They always saw me as the bad guy, the bad kid, the different kid. So I know. Don't teach kids this bullshit. Don't tell them they're gay or they're trans or any of this other stuff. Don't tell them they're a bad kid. Educate them, teach them, share them all the odds and ends of the world and of life. It's not going to be easy for any of us or any of them. Anyways, thank you for listening to that. In other news, Biden signs an order on cryptocurrency as its use explodes, per Yahoo News. President Joe Biden on Wednesday signed an executive order on government oversight of cryptocurrency that urges the Federal Reserve to explore whether the central bank should jump in and create its own digital currency. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen said the effort would promote a fair, more inclusive, and more efficient financial system. Well, countering illicit finance and preventing risk to financial stability and national security. So basically, the government is now looking into crypto, and my guess is regulation is coming down the road once they figure out what's going on. Because, if it hasn't been clear to you, our government really struggles with technology, or at least they make it look like it. So we'll have to pay closer attention to this. Maybe not. Maybe this is one of those things that I could be wrong about. I want to be wrong about it. I like the fact that right now there's really no oversight when it comes to cryptocurrency. And I like how you can make transactions and, send Bitcoins and things like that to people without the government knowing. And I think that's how it should be, because that's your money. You should be able to do what you want with your money without anybody knowing what you're doing with your money. So it's an interesting concept and might be how we manage our finances in the future. We'll see. Hey, thanks again for checking out another RooneyBin Jay Rooney Show edition. Go get a workout in, eat healthy, make sure you're walking every single day, and don't forget to play and have fun. The Jay Rooney Show.